The name Prometheus has become synonymous with two words, fire and thief. And this link between Prometheus, fire and thief is there for a good reason. He was both forward-thinking and selfish, causing him plenty of problems. When you think about the word trickster, you might think of someone like Loki, but the original trickster in Greek mythology was Prometheus. A champion of mankind, Prometheus was a well-liked and worshipped god, or rather, a titan. And he wasn't worshipped in the traditional sense. He had a cult behind him. To understand why Prometheus as a titan was different from the gods of Greek mythology, we need to first understand what a titan is. During the legendary Golden Age of Greek mythology, the Titans were a race of extremely powerful deities, godlike beings, who ruled the universe. They were children of Uranus, which is the sky, and Gaia, Earth. The Titans were each representing various elements of the natural world, from the ocean to the sun, the primal forces that steered the universe. The universe was balanced and peaceful, until a prophecy became apparent. Cronus, the leader of the Titans, who was the god of time, had overthrown his father Uranus based on this prophecy that he too would be overthrown by his own child. Scared that he would lose his throne, he made the same mistake that his father did, and turned into a terrible, angry king who fought to stay in power. Cronus imprisoned his brothers and swallowed each of his children as they were born, but his wife, Rhea, decided to save the youngest, Zeus, who was hidden in a cave on the island of Crete, where a goat raised him named Amalthea. When Zeus grew up, he wanted revenge. He went to his father's mountain home and served him as a cupbearer. His father, Cronus, did not know that Zeus was his son. Zeus fooled his father into drinking a mixture of mustard in his wine, causing Cronus to throw up all of his children he had eaten, one by one. Once they were out of his father's belly, Zeus convinced them to rebel against Cronus. This marked the beginning of the Titanomachy, a 10-year war which was not just a battle for supremacy, but symbolized the shifting into a new era, where the Titans would lose control over the universe. Now was the time for the Olympians, a new order of gods with different values and goals, with Zeus as their leader. Prometheus was, as I said, a Titan, but he decided to side with the Olympians during the war rather than his fellow Titans. He had the gift of foresight. He knew that the Olympians led by Zeus were destined to win. So as the other Titans were punished by imprisonment in Tartarus after their defeat, Prometheus was both free and had favor amongst the Olympian gods. Since he was favored, Prometheus, in Ovid's Metamorphoses, is created with the creation of human beings in godlike image, from clay, meaning that he was responsible for the creation of all of humanity. In the myths, Prometheus and his brother Epimetheus were ordered by the mighty Cronus to make creatures that would populate the rather empty earth. Prometheus got to work and carefully, painstakingly crafted a creature after the shape of a god, a man. These are believed to be Prometheus' guiding forces to creating the human species. Humans were made to stand upright, symbolizing their special status in the world. This upright posture was meant to inspire humans to look towards the heavens, unlike other animals who were oriented towards Earth. Certain qualities and skills were given to the humans, such as the ability to think, learn, and create. Prometheus wanted them to be able to develop and build. Now that the guidelines were set into place, Prometheus and Epimetheus went on a journey to Earth from Olympus, then to the Greek province of Boeotia to create clay figures. The clay signified the connection of humans to the Earth, since the clay comes from the Earth, mixed with water, symbolizing life and purity. This mix was what created the essence of the human race. So the clay figures were standing there, lifeless, but the goddess Athena breathed life into the figures, giving them a divine spark that transformed them from clay to flesh, giving a soul to the humans. The newly created human beings honored Prometheus, whilst the figures that his brother Epimetheus had created became beasts, which turned and attacked him. Prometheus wasn't just a creator of humanity, but also a protector and teacher. As mentioned before, he put thought into his creations and therefore wanted to see the continued success of them. But for some reason, Zeus was angered by the actions of both Prometheus and Epimetheus, and he forbade the pair from teaching humanity the ways of civilization. For their defiant actions, Zeus demanded that a sacrifice be made to the gods from human beings to demonstrate that they were both obedient and worshipful. The gods and the humans arranged a meeting at Mycone, where the sacrifice would be settled. Prometheus threw down a large ox and divided it into 2 piles. In one pile he put all the meat and most of the fat, cleverly covering it with ox's grotesque stomach, while in the other pile he dressed up the bones skillfully with shining fat, making it look delicious. Prometheus then invited Zeus to choose a pile for the gods. Zeus, however, saw through the trick, but nonetheless chose the pile of bones, since he realized that in willfully getting tricked, he would have an excuse to take out his anger on the humans. Some sources claim that Zeus did not, in fact, see through the trickery by Prometheus. In his wrath, Zeus denied humankind the secret of fire, and Prometheus was forced to watch his creations as they shivered through the cold winter nights. The relationship between humans and the gods of Greek mythology was often full of tension and conflict. Since there were many extremely powerful gods, much more powerful than the humans, they often intervened in human affairs, altering the course of important events to their whims or desires. Some had relationships with each other, resulting in the birth of demigods or heroes, such as Heracles or Perseus. The gods' interactions with humans were complex and had many sides, but the punishments were always harsh and unforgiving. Defiance against the gods was not taken lightly, and Prometheus would come to find this out. As he was watching his creations suffering in a weak, vulnerable state of ignorance and misery, he needed to do something. Zeus, who was the ruling god at the time, had the idea that humans were not meant to have any unusual power, which Prometheus, who after all had created humans, disagreed with. But full of wit and intelligence, he came up with a plan. First, he employed some trickery, throwing a golden pear into the courtyard with a message, for the most beautiful goddess of all. This worked, as the goddesses in the courtyard started a fight over the fruit, while the gods were completely enjoying the scene. All of them were distracted as Prometheus snuck into Hephaestus, the Greek god of fire's workshop. Prometheus happily left the god's playground and took the fire with him, in either a hollowed pumpkin or a hollowed reed, depending on the interpretation, and brought it to Earth. Thus, fire was given to humanity, who not only gained the power to cook food and heat their houses. The fire is much more than a physical element. It represented knowledge, technology, and the light of reason, all tools and insights that allow human progress and civilization. When Prometheus gave fire to the humans, he was, in effect, giving the divine power that only the gods had to the mortals. As the ancient Greek poet Hesiod put it, not only does Zeus withhold fire from humanity, but the means of life as well. Had Prometheus not provoked Zeus' wrath, he would easily do work enough in a day to supply you for a full year even without working. Soon would you put away your rudder over the smoke, and the fields worked by ox and sturdy mule would run to waste. But the fire also gave humans more power to fight amongst each other, to rebel against the gods' actions. Were they really ready to be introduced to this power? Sisyphus was another man in Greek folklore that was cunning in nature. He tricked the gods multiple times and was ultimately punished for his hubris and defiance, cheating death as an example. But the difference between Sisyphus and Prometheus was that Sisyphus' actions primarily served his own interests. Punished by being condemned to roll a huge boulder up a hill, only for it to roll back down each time it neared the top. Sisyphus did not contribute to the good of the world around him. He wanted entertainment, perhaps fulfillment in his own right. Tricking the gods was his goal. Prometheus, on the other hand, was a heroic trickster, trying to make life better for his creation. But tricking the gods in Greek mythology always has consequences. Sisyphus' punishment was doomed to an absurd, endless struggle, rolling the boulder up the hill over and over again, repeating the cycle for all eternity. Prometheus' punishment, on the other hand, was equally cruel. As mentioned before, Zeus was outraged by Prometheus' theft of fire, so he took him far to the east. Some sources say the Caucasus Mountains. Here, Prometheus was chained to a rock. If that wasn't bad enough, Zeus had more plans for his punishment. He sent an eagle which would feast on Prometheus' immortal liver. Even worse, the liver regrew every night, and the eagle returned each day to perpetually torment him. This punishment was planned to be eternal, but as we're going to learn later, there was some redemption or relief for Prometheus. Not only was Prometheus punished, of course, the humans also had to face some consequences, as they always did. What I did not mention before was that Prometheus had only created men, not women. In Hesiod's works and days, we are told that Zeus, after Prometheus' punishment, instructed Hephaestus to create the first woman, Pandora, from clay, and through her, all the negative aspects of life would fall onto the human race: toil, illness, war, and death. This, in Zeus' mind, would definitively separate mankind from the gods. Zeus sends Pandora to Earth as a retaliation, to teach the men a lesson. Pandora carried a jar with her, which contained and later released mischief and sorrow, plague and diseases. Pandora shuts the lid, but it's too late to contain all the evil plights that escaped. But hope is left trapped in the jar because Zeus forced Pandora to seal it up before hope could escape. In essence, Prometheus himself, as well as his creation of mankind, was punished. Mankind were stripped of their utopia-like world, and Prometheus was doomed to eternal torture. But as mythology went on, we can see that mankind solved, or rather, survived the hardships that they had to endure. With the gift of fire, they forged their own destiny rather than relying solely on the gods. Ingenuity and adaptability, key aspects of the human spirit, were introduced with the gift of fire, which led them to developing technology. It was a catalyst for a thriving Earth. As Prometheus was chained to the rock, day in and day out being eaten alive and tormented by the eagle, he, unbeknownst to him, had a savior incoming. Heracles, known as Hercules in Roman mythology, which is also the name most people know him by, was the son of Zeus and Alcmene, a mortal woman. His birth was controversial. Zeus was married to the god Hera at the time, and his infidelity with the mortal woman sparked outrage from Hera. She despised Hercules from birth because he was a living reminder of her husband's infidelity. Hera frequently acted against Hercules throughout his life, starting with sending 2 serpents to kill him in his crib, which the infant Hercules strangled with his bare hands. Hercules was driven mad by Hera, so he killed his own wife and their children. When he regained his sanity and realized what he had done, he sought purification. He was given a series of 12 labors as a way to purify himself, given to him by King Eurystheus. These tasks were meant to be nearly impossible, but for Hercules, nothing was impossible. The labors that Hercules had to face were extremely challenging and dangerous. They include slaying the Nemenian lion, capturing the golden hind of Artemis, capturing the Erymanthian boar, cleaning the Augean stables in a single day, slaying the 9-headed Lernaean hydra, obtaining the girdle of Hippolyta, queen of the Amazons, capturing the Cretan bull, stealing the mares of Diomedes, obtaining the cattle of the monster Geryon, stealing the apples of Hesperides, and capturing Cerberus, the three-headed dog guarding the underworld. Each of these challenges had its own symbolic meaning, and combined, Hercules managed to purify himself, and he was regarded as a symbol of extreme strength, courage, and endurance. If anyone was fit for the job of saving Prometheus, he was the one. During what is considered Hercules' last labor that he had to complete, Hercules was tasked to retrieve the golden apples of Hesperides. This led him to the region where Prometheus was chained. Hercules saw the eagle who was feasting on Prometheus' liver and decided to shoot and kill it. These were specific arrows, described as being tipped with the lethal Hydra's venom, making them extremely potent. Now, here's where the story splits into two different versions. Some versions say that Hercules' act of freeing Prometheus was done with the consent or even the blessing of Zeus. If this is true, then it means that Prometheus and Zeus had come to a reconciliation, with Zeus finally accepting that humanity had a major role in the world. Since the reason Prometheus was punished in the first place was because Zeus did not want humanity to have such power, this would be the happy ending, so to say. Now, other versions say that it was a seemingly random act by Hercules, and that there wasn't anything particular behind it. Depending on these two variations of the myth, Prometheus was either able to return to Olympus to live with Zeus and the other gods, or he went to Earth and lived among humans. But what is generally agreed upon is that his release from the chains were an end to his conflict with Zeus. As a demigod, Hercules showed how he would often bridge the gap between gods and others, such as he did here. If it wasn't for Hercules, who knows how long Prometheus would keep being tortured. Prometheus and Sisyphus were the prime examples of punishments dealt from the gods of Greek mythology. Zeus was a complicated god, sometimes fair, but a lot of the times cruel. Punishment and retribution is a recurring theme in Greek mythology, and to truly understand how the dynamic between gods and other gods, gods and humans, and gods and demigods works, we need to understand a few things. You see, Zeus was the upholder of law and justice. He was the judge, jury, and executioner. There were not necessarily any laws. Zeus was focused on keeping what is called the natural order in the universe. There are two key concepts that Zeus was the protector of: xenia, guest friendship, and oaths. Zeus was the protector of xenia, the ancient Greek concept of hospitality and the respectful relationship between host and guest. When this was violated, Zeus invoked his wrath with a suitable punishment. He punished humans, demigods, and gods alike, but a common theme is that every punishment served as a moral lesson. These stories were used to teach the values of Greek society, such as respect for authority, adherence to laws, and the consequences of overreaching one's bounds. But Zeus was not perfect. His behavior and punishments reflect the human qualities that every Greek god had. Unlike omnibenevolent gods of other religions, Greek gods, including Zeus, were depicted with human flaws and emotions, such as anger, jealousy, and vengefulness. These emotions could sway or amplify certain reactions that Zeus had. Nonetheless, Zeus wanted to establish and keep the order of things as they were, with mankind at the bottom and gods at the top. But were the consequences of gifting fire also a good enough reason for Zeus to deliver such a cruel fate to Prometheus? As I mentioned before, fire was good for the humans, but as I also said, fire can cause harm and destruction. With the power of fire came a new level of moral responsibility. The ability to both create and destroy required considerations about how such a power should be used. This foreshadows later ethical dilemmas that humanity would face with more advanced technologies. Take a modern example. Oppenheimer played a key role in the development of the atomic bomb as the scientific director of the Manhattan Project, leading to the end of World War II, creating a point of no return for humanity, an era of nuclear proliferation. It became a central element in later wars such as the Cold War, leading to an arms race and constant threat of nuclear conflict, which has carried into today. Oppenheimer himself experienced deep moral qualms about his role in creating this new technology, along with the bomb. Oppenheimer said, quoting the ancient Bhagavad Gita, "Now I am become death, the destroyer of worlds." You might think that you can't compare giving fire to humans to nukes, but the development of nuclear technology also had peaceful applications, such as in medicine and energy production. It also had the dual nature that fire has. Both Prometheus' fire and Oppenheimer's atomic bomb represent something beyond their physical form. They represent knowledge and power that can be used for the benefit or the destruction of humanity. They also show the unintended consequences that follow huge breakthroughs. Whilst Prometheus' intentions were purely for good, the misuse of fire and the release of evils from Pandora's box parallels even the devastating effects of nuclear weapons. But could a titan like Prometheus be worshipped? Was he elevated to the level of the gods for his heroic actions? Prometheus did in fact have a cult, but it was fairly small. Quoting the Greek traveler and geographer Pausanias, "In the academy, outside Athens, is an altar to Prometheus, and from it they run to the city carrying burning torches. The contest is, while running, to keep the torches still alight. If the torch of the first runner goes out, he has no longer any claim to victory, but the second runner has. If his torch also goes out, then the third man is the victor. If all the torches go out, no one is left to be the winner." It is argued that it's wrong to assume that since a figure appears as an important character in folklore, he is necessarily an important cult-like figure. Prometheus was apparently not all that important in Greek folklore. His importance might have been blown up by Hesiod, who I mentioned before as one of the sources of Prometheus' story. He greatly emphasized Prometheus' importance. That's why we find Prometheus of some importance in literature, but really relatively little importance in actual folklore or cult practice. But as a quote from Pausanias said, Prometheus had an altar at the academy, from which the torch race began every year. Nonetheless, the story of Prometheus is one of bravery, foresight, and trickery. He wanted to create something extraordinary, mankind, embodying the archetype of the lone genius whose efforts to improve human existence resulted in tragedy.